Welcome to my QUARANTALK. I'm a Nouripur, member of the German Federal Parliament, and very happy that I can welcome today Smita Sharma, who is a profile journalist from India, focusing on a lot of domestic issues like health, gender equality, and human rights, and also focused on international affairs, regional and global ones. Smita, thank you very much for taking time.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. Glad to be here.
The situation in South Asia is changing massively because of COVID, like it is in the rest of the world also. How is it there? Could you describe it to us?
You know, in terms of the numbers and the fatalities, it's still way better than the kind of scenarios that we have seen play out in the epicenters of Hubei and Wuhan in China, or in Milan in Italy, Qom in Tehran, or in the US in particular. I mean, the numbers have been humongous out there. In India, as of yesterday evening, you're looking at a country with 138 crores of population, 1.3 billion population, and the number of positive cases are a little less than 38,000. So, which is comparatively much lower. The active cases, and if you look at the discharged cases of around 10,000, there have been deaths of 18 people, so almost a little more than 1,200 people because of coronavirus. But in the past 24 hours, we've seen a couple of jumps. So 71 deaths have actually happened in the past 24 hours itself. But overall, if you were look at the numbers coming in from Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, in the SAARC context, the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, the 8 member nations, the numbers are very insignificant, or fraction less than 1% when it comes to the death rates elsewhere. But the challenges are huge, and I think the challenges are going to play out once the countries start coming out of the lockdown mode.
Okay, and the lockdown means that, for example, social life is now frozen. When I was in India last time, 2 months ago, there had been huge protests because of the Citizenship Amendment Act. All of this is gone, right?
Two aspects to it. Look, India announced the sudden nationwide lockdown, which is being considered as one of the strictest lockdowns across the world. And we were, in fact, in an extended phase that was going to lift up or end on 3rd of May. Just last evening, the government has put out fresh announcements. And what they have done is now it's a graded opening up of the lockdown. So the country has been divided into red zones or containment zones, where active cases continue to be reported from. From the red zones, if no cases has been reported in 21 days, they go on to the orange zones. And the orange zones, if they haven't reported a fresh case in 21 days, they have moved on to the green zone. On the face of it, they have allowed some industries, some movement, especially in the green zones. So, you can now find a cab in a taxi or a bus, but there are limitations, there are restrictions on it. So a bus can only ply with 50% of its target, in fact, seats, or there are only 2 people allowed to ply in a 4 vehicle. But these are all essentially green and orange zones. The problem is that this grading down has, in a way, brought to the forefront the issues of red tapeism, the issues of local police acting as authoritarian control centers, and just too many centers sharing power at the moment, which is adding to this confusion. On the issue of CAA, or the Citizenship Amendment Act that we mentioned, yes, the protests had to be cleaned out. Shaheen Bagh, in fact, which was the longest peaceful sort of anti-CAA protest that had been taking place. There were cases of confirmed coronavirus that were reported from the area. So finally, the protesters decided to suspend the protests for now. But what is worrisome is that a lot of the recent arrests that have been made, a lot of the cases that have been now reported, the police action that's happening, even as the country is dealing with the pandemic and with the current lockdown situation, a lot of people are being, have been picked up for having organized these protests, significantly many of them from the minority community. So one can only hope that this is not the typical signs at display of an increasingly police state, which is using a pandemic to try and push forward some political agendas, or actually becoming more and more authoritarian.
Okay, thank you very much. What about the migrant workers? We saw all of the pictures of these desperate people now being jobless.
The problem with the migrant workers is because it's such a large unorganized sector in India, and these migrant workers, when we first reported, when this lockdown was announced, the stories of cruelty, people who started undertaking hundreds of kilometers of journeys just to be able to reach their homes and villages, because overnight the jobs dried up in the cities. Obviously, if the city was in a lockdown, your factories weren't working, your construction sites had come to a halt, the daily wagers didn't know where to earn their wages from. So a cycle repair shop had closed down, people didn't have painting jobs, and the stories were reported by independent media, by alternate media platforms, of how many of them were actually facing health problems, complications, and the quarantine facilities, by a lot of government agencies, they are very questionable, because the kind of images that we've seen, a lot of them actually start to look like zoos where people are treated like animals. It's heartbreaking for these people to even afford rent. But now, in the past 48 hours, we've seen a lot of development happening around this. The government, as far as the intra-state movement is concerned, several trains have now started, which are called the Shramik Special or the Laborer Special. So in fact, yesterday there are particular states which act as the export states for laborers. So when you look at, Maharashtra, they are the import states where people come to work. But if you look at Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Odisha, these are the export states from where the laborers go out to the other cities, including in Delhi and all. So a lot of trains have started flying. Some states have also sent out buses to bring home stranded passengers, stranded students, pilgrims. That's a sizable community which has been impacted a lot. But I think the interstate movement, by and large, the air movement, train movement, they all still are not operational. They would still continue to be stopped for the next 2 weeks, which is the extended lockdown period for all zones, including green, orange, and red.
Okay. Thank you very much for this very, very impressive overview of that, what's going on in your country. Let me go to the international level. Everybody is now discussing China, their masked diplomacy, the symbols of being the savior of the planet, versus Americans, the American administration especially trying to blame it on any level. How's the Indian view on that, what China is playing now?
I think it's working at two levels. As far as the official level is concerned, there's a measured approach, because I think there is that realization that at the end of the day, China is still the country you still have to depend on as the world's factory for processed raw material, and things cannot shift overnight. That transformation cannot take place. Internally, it's also being used as a political rhetoric by the ruling party to try and send out a signal that there is an opportunity in crisis for us and we are going to step up. There have been issues with Chinese testing kits that have come in. They've been found faulty by large numbers, because of which the Indian Council for Medical Research, in fact, had to ban the rapid testing kits. But at the same time, the supplies are still continuing from China, because while there are countries like South Korea that have now ramped up production, or domestically, India is trying to ramp up production, because India is also sending out supplies of medicines like hydroxychloroquine, or in fact some PPEs to some neighboring countries on a commercial or a humanitarian basis. So there are domestic needs, there are international needs, and India is trying to ramp up on that image of being able to provide some sort of a leadership, at least at the regional level. But on China, because this is also the 70th year of diplomatic ties establishment between India and China, what we will see, I think, moving forward is that there will be obviously that sense of caution, there will be that sense of suspicion, there will be that sense of doubt which has always existed in bilateral ties, even though the business had been going strong. But India will have to get its act right, because as of now, I don't think India is straight away competing with the Chinese lot in trying to woo investors into the country. It's more into a competition with maybe the Southeast Asian nations of Vietnam or Philippines or Bangladesh closer home. So there is a lot that needs to be done in terms of land reforms, land acquisitions, environmental clearances, and federal, getting the cooperative federalism, in fact, framework stronger before India can get in all those manufacturing units and become a part of a stepped up global supply chain.
Okay, so and what about the question of a vaccine? It's obvious that there won't be a solution without international cooperation. Is India involved in that?
It is, in fact, that we have been reading reports of India, like if you look at Netherlands, there you have the research and development firms of some of the biggest companies, including Johnson & Johnson. So India has been collaborating with Netherlands on R&D. There are other places also where the Indian embassies and missions have been tasked with the job of getting in, the good practices. We have the IITs here in India, engineers here who are trying to devise low-cost ventilators, low-cost PPEs, the vaccine mode. But what is clear is, of course, we have been hearing reports. In fact, you will have a better idea of human trial stages in UK and Germany now for certain vaccines. But these vaccines, by any good luck or chance, will take at least a year or more to finally be able to, come into effect and for people to start using them after it's cleared off all the trial stages. So which is why, in fact, the big debate in India is that issue of life versus livelihood. Because if you continue with the lockdown, even if you're lifting it up in a graded stage, how long can you do it? I mean, having a 21-day window before you declare a zone as green or orange, it's a huge risk, because there are hardly going to be any zone that will perhaps not report any case for 21 days. So how long can you actually continue with economic activities, coming to a halt or not resuming economic activities? People will have to find a balance. Governments will have to find a balance between trying to go back to their work and at the same time maintaining all the norms of sanitation, social distancing, strict, in fact, implementation in private or government sectors, while we wait and hope that the world can come up with a vaccine cure to this killer of a pandemic very soon.
Yeah, hopefully. What about the European Union? How's your view on that, how we are doing it here? Are we fully occupied with ourselves, or do you think there could be a window of opportunity for better cooperation on a different types of challenges we are now facing in the pandemic?
See, at the level of the masses or the public, European Union really is not a subject that is discussed here. I'll be brutally honest. But at the level of government, of course, the government has been in close touch. I mean, and especially given the relations with countries like France, Germany, which are strategically important, which are also important partners in the G20 framework, the government has been dialing up their counterparts, holding virtual meetings. And I think there is that realization that of course, there is money that these countries can put in. Just yesterday, I was talking to the ambassador here of Estonia, the Baltic nation, and she was also of the opinion that, for Donald Trump to announce that the funding should be withdrawn from WHO, they come at a very wrong time. And so Estonia has stepped up its funding. Similarly, the Australians, I was talking to the Australian High Commissioner, Barry O'Farrell, yesterday, and they have also stepped up their funding. So there are a lot of countries that are stepping in. So similarly is the story with France, that is putting in a lot of money into the WHO fund to deal with this pandemic and the vaccine options and R&D. So I think for European Union, going forward, these uncertainties are something that will be a challenge for all countries, regardless of which zone or which continent you are in. You will have to figure out how countries will have to remain outward looking and not become totally inward looking as they deal with this crisis. But we will see impacts on borders, we will see restrictions, we'll see job issues for Indians stranded across European cities, students stranded across, which was not a very happy memory. But people will get over it, because this is not something that was done out of free volition. This was a sudden black swan event that changed the course of the world, and people will have to look at solutions somewhere.
Absolutely. Let me just ask you a last question on the World Health Organization, because you mentioned that. Ma'am, to me it's obvious that not any single critical point President Trump brought up against them is totally wrong. But I fully agree that this is the wrong moment to cut subsidies and funding of them. And it's obvious that the UN bodies are now getting more and more under the control of those who are paying for them, and especially these days this is China. How are you discussing the role of the WHO?
The discussion even before COVID hit us, because this is not an overnight phenomena where we see that several UN-led organizations today are controlled by Chinese nationals or by individuals who are supposedly, who enjoy a backing of the Chinese state.
Like Mr. Tedros.
Yeah, including Dr. Tedros. He's an Ethiopian, but his leadership has been questioned immensely. But at the I guess you have to weigh the pros and cons at this point in time. I mean, if you stop working with the existing mechanisms, do you have an alternate mechanism in place already to go around? These things don't come up overnight, they take time. I mean, even after the subprime crisis, it took some time before G20 sort of shaped up, started working on financial blueprints. It took some time before something of an AIIB, the Asian Investment Infrastructure Bank, came up with, of course, Chinese pockets involved in that as well. But it still has utility. So I think while there is a unanimity that yes, all of these multilateral organizations need to have an important transformation to be able to reflect contemporary realities. But at the end of the day, I mean, if you look at something like the Security Council, do you really think an expansion will be possible with a veto building Russia, a veto building China, a China that thinks that this is a war, a sort of a direct confrontation, as direct as it can get with the United States? The moment US puts out an investigation into a Chinese Wuhan lab, there will be finger pointing happening that, you're trying to run an agenda. So this is precisely why you need multilateral frameworks, independent reviews, so that the finger pointing is less and the outcomes are more. But, for now, I think these are the existing structures. They do need a reform without a doubt. They do need to be held accountable without a doubt. But you need to work along with them to strengthen them. You cannot just sort of, completely wish them away at this point in time.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you very much. By the way, I would love to see your country as a permanent member of the UN Security Council very soon. Smita Sharma, thank you very much for taking time and giving me the opportunity to ask you a couple of questions about what's going on, not only in India, but all across India and around India. Thank you very much. Hope to see you soon, physically. In 3D.
Absolutely. Amen. Lovely. Thank you so much. I'm glad to see a parliamentarian actually interview a journalist for a change.
Next time I'm gonna broadcast the next interview tomorrow. Thank you very much. Bye.